Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Unfiltered. I am joined today by Paul Halfpenny. How are you doing, Paul?
Very well, thank you. Hello.
Paul is the CTO of Filter, which is a digital agency which works with open source solutions such as WordPress, React, and Laravel. And today we're going to talk around the subject of personalization on your website. I guess to begin that conversation, though, we really need to ask the question, what is personalization?
Well, I guess personalization is when you see content that is directly influenced by what you need. So it's where a website is understanding your needs and behaviors and then giving you content that it thinks that you're interested in.
So we're going to explore this a little bit further, but I'm keen to know, is this something that you implement fairly widely and deeply within your agency?
Yeah, it's something we've been doing for years. So all of the major CMS platforms, such as Sitecore, Kentico, Optimizely, they've all had personalization built into those platforms over a number of years and allow people that use those platforms to be able to manage the content that their users are seeing based on what they know about those users. And you can also go a step further beyond just using it for your CMS. You might use a customer data platform which ingests data from multiple different sources, such as Facebook or Google or Twitter, as well as your own first party data, and then allows you to build up a picture of your website visitor and then send content to them that's relevant to all of the things that you know about them.
Now, this, I guess, is a fairly complicated subject. There's lots of depth to it and all of that. So, in order to make things a little bit easier, I know that you've created a slide deck which we're going to talk through. So, I'll raise that onto the screen now. And yeah, let's go through this. And if I've got any questions as we're going, I will interrupt and ask them.
Great. So we're talking specifically about personalization for WordPress here today. So WordPress is a CMS platform. You've probably heard of it, and it's one of the biggest platforms in the world. It runs approximately 40% of the internet. Doesn't necessarily have all the answers for personalization right now, though, like a commercial CMS platform might do. But let's take a step back and let's understand again what personalization really is. So personalization is the process of knowing the needs and the preferences and the interests of your customers so you can serve them what they're looking for when they're looking for it. And that's really important. A lot of this personalization is around context, and it's about the time that you will serve a piece of content to a user. It's really important, we think, that you have personalization built into your content marketing strategy because it can help you gain customers and it can help you drive increased sales and leads, which obviously increase revenue for your business. So what you want to do is you want to provide relevant communications. You want to improve the user experience. You want to understand their needs, and you want to reduce the length of their journey. So you're getting them to the end point much more quickly. But it's really important, and this is probably a key part of personalization. Not every user is the same. So, we are past the point of every user landing on your homepage. Like that a lot of people still land on your homepage, but it's not where all of your users land anymore. Everybody comes to your site on a different page and as part of a different journey. So they'll land on different pages and they'll all have different motivations. And if you understand that from the beginning, then you can start to build up a picture of different types of customers that you might see, like personas, and understand why they're there and what they're looking to get from your website. And then by implementing different rules that allow you to show different content to different groups of users, you can help create a better experience for them and ultimately help them to find answers faster, whether that's a piece of content that provides them the answer or actually just a product that they want to buy, which is the answer they're looking for.
So, can I just interject there, just so that I'm clear about this? This is the idea that if I come to your website, there may be parts of the website which are generic, which
Yeah.
everybody is seeing, but equally, there may be bits which are adapted for me specifically or a cohort like me, so that I'm seeing something which is more likely to resonate, more likely to engage me, because it in some way represents the journey that I've taken, or the place that I'm living, or some kind of interaction that I've had in the past, which you know about. So have I more or less summed that up right?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Great.
think I think it's important that you don't try and over personalize. So that there is a point at which it becomes a little bit freaky and a little bit scary, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
you know too much about that individual, and you're going to customize their entire experience. Um, that reminds me of platforms on like social media, like Facebook, where they know everything about what you've done and you've ever clicked on. What we're trying to get to with personalization is you're trying to make sure that the customer can find what they're looking for as quickly as possible, or you're trying to give them information that they might not otherwise have found. So a really good example of that, and I'll come to the example on the screen in the moment, is if you're running a small business, and you know that you're going to be closed for a specific period of time, you might want to make sure that people see that message,
Mm.
because that to stop them coming to your shop, or your opening hours are different at Christmas. Um, that's kind of a message that you might send to a specific group of users. The example we've got up on screen at the moment is if you're running a promotion on Facebook. What you might want to do is when somebody comes to your site and you know they've come from that promotion on Facebook, or they've come from Facebook in general, you're going to check to see that they've come from there, and then you're going to open up a special pop-up and give them a special promotion. So that means that you can run advertising on Facebook, or you can run a campaign on Facebook. But when they come to your site, you know that you're going to target those specific people and show them something different to everybody else.
Right. So in this case, in the case that you've just mentioned, the trigger, if you like, the condition is, did they come from Facebook? And that's just one of the myriad different things that you can have as a condition. Got it. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've shown in these examples here is you can show that in a couple of different ways. So in the first example, we showed a pop-up appearing to somebody. Um, with WordPress, you don't need to do it as a pop-up. Pop-ups can be a little bit annoying for some users. Not everybody likes them. They're not great on mobile devices, for instance. Um, so you might decide that you're actually just going to embed that content as a new block into a page, so it's seamlessly part of the page rather than doing it as a pop-up. Another example of doing personalization is where you start to show visitors your site the kind of content that you think they're interested in.
Hmm.
So the example we've got here is around related articles, and you see this on lots of websites that you might go to, particularly news-based or publishing-based websites that have content where they'll say like stories you might be interested in, and here's some articles that you might like. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. We can do it based on the category of article that you're looking at. So if you're looking at an article about dogs, for instance, then we might show you more articles about dogs because you've gone to an article about dogs, and therefore we think that you might be interested in other articles about dogs. On the website here that we're showing on the filter website, somebody's looking at accessibility articles, so we're showing them more articles based around accessibility. But I think the real win is when you get to the point where you're tracking that user around your site, and you're not just showing them the same thing as they last looked at. Actually, what you're doing is you're going to look at all of the content articles that they're doing, and then you use some AI or some algorithms in the back end to go, well, actually, there's a higher percentage that they're interested in this kind of content. So it might not be related to the specific article, but it might be related to subsections of that article that they might be interested in. So, for instance, if you were looking at a website around animals, it's always a really good example. You might start to look at website articles that are based on a dog, and most companies would just show, here's some more articles based on a dog. What we do with one of our other clients is that we look at the types of articles that they are, and generally there's another theme underneath that. It's probably more around the health of their dog. So maybe they're looking at dog articles for young dogs, and actually therefore we've understood that they're looking for younger dogs, not all dogs, and then we can have a subset of articles that are related to that particular theme, and we'll show them that instead. Another example might be where they're looking at the health of a dog. Maybe there's a particular condition that they may have. So we'll start to pop in content related to the services that they offer around that particular health condition.
So you're building up a bigger picture. The more that the person engages with the site and the more content that they consume, the more rounded is your knowledge of what they like. So it's not just dogs, but it's dog health, it's
Yeah.
dog, etc., etc. All of the things around that. I can absolutely guarantee that in my life, this kind of thing works because I consume a daily newspaper in the UK online, and they clearly have some technology like this. Because at the bottom of the articles, not only am I getting information which is clearly directly related to something I've just read, but they're also showing me things which are based upon my reading yesterday or the previous week or are kind of adjacent to the subjects that I've looked at. And I stay on that website probably a lot more than I should
Mm.
because it's just really engaging. They've just figured out the perfect pattern for me and it works really well. I don't feel coerced because it's just offering it. Here's some nice things you might like to look at. And yeah, so for me, it's working.
I think I think they're probably using a couple of these different methods of personalization. So you can see here on the screen we've got different types of personalization. So it's broadly split into 6 buckets. So the first one is behavioral. So that is things like the pages that you have viewed or where you've come from, your inbound links. Maybe it's to do with whether you're logged into the website or the time that you're visiting the website. Quite a lot of the time, it's based around purchase history as well. So, what have you actually done on that website? The second one is geographic. So, that's where somebody lives or is accessing the site from. So, are they accessing it from the UK? Are they accessing it from the US? Are they accessing it from somewhere else? Are they accessing it from a specific town or city? That information is available to us based on your IP address, which is public information that comes along with you when you visit a website. It's not fully accurate, but it gives a guide as to where you are. The third one's demographic. So if we can understand your age or your gender, that might lead to different decisions about what content we will send you. So if we know that you're young, you're probably more interested in TikTok, unlike us, who are probably a little bit older and probably on Facebook, because that's where we are in life. But gender comes down to it a little bit as well. So if you're male or you're female, you will have different needs and interests. Psychographics, quite an interesting one because it's based on lifestyle. This is a harder one to actually find out about. And this one will be based around your interests, your opinions, or your beliefs and values. And this kind of personalization will generally not be when you're browsing a website. This will be information that you might give to a website
Right.
in a form or a survey where they can understand a little bit more about you. Firmographic is companies, really. So what's your company size? What's your revenue? What's location you're in? What market you're in? And then technographic is around the kind of browser and device you're looking at. So we've all heard the stories about, you can browse a travel website, to put it in generic terms. And if you're on an iOS device, you're going to get higher prices than if you're browsing on an Android device. Now, I don't know how true that is. I think it's probably an apocryphal story, but I think there is some ability to be able to do that when you're using personalization. I don't think it's right necessarily, but the ability is there.
Can I just ask you a question about that previous slide, the 1 through 6
Of
one?
course.
Is there a reason that you've ordered it in that order? So behavioral came first, geographic, demographic, and so on and so forth. Is there a sort of pecking order there of ease, if you like? In other words, is it easier to get if you're just beginning on the journey of personalization? Is behavioral the quickest win, if you like?
It is actually the technographics quite easy as well, although it's
Mm.
down the list. But yeah, so the first 3 are generally the ones that are the easiest to start off with because you have access to that data either by virtue of somebody using your website or because that data's available to you in the underlying technology. So if somebody comes to your website, your browser will give away a little bit of information to you or to your website about who that user is. So your browser is going to tell you where they came from, and it's going to tell you their IP address, and it's going to tell you obviously what browser or device they're on. So those three things are really easy
Mm,
to access. Behavioral is the easiest one because you're building up a pattern as you go without necessarily requiring anybody to give you data. So psychographic and firmographic definitely require you to give data to that website in a quite an explicit manner, whether that's via a form submission or a survey, as we talked about, or being logged in to a website where you've actually created a profile and you've gone above and beyond just creating a basic profile, and you've actually given more information to that website. Whereas, behavioral, where you're clicking around a website, you're looking at things, maybe you're dwelling on an article for a certain
right.
period of time. That sort of information doesn't require you to necessarily explicitly give information, but it can be inferred from what you're doing.
Great. Thank you.
So if we look at how we do that, so we've talked just then about being able to have implicit data or kind of explicit data, and these are some of the ways that you can capture visitor data on your website. So cookies are one. So everybody slightly wary of cookies, but it basically allows your browser, your website, to store stuff in your browser about you and maybe what you've done. So you might see in a cookie whether you're a new visitor or a returning visitor, for instance, or we might be able to store some information in that cookie about what you've done on that website. Um, Primarily, we will be tracking site usage to understand where you're going on that website, the kind of articles that you're interested in, and how long you've been viewing those articles for. So, dwell time is quite an important metric. So,
Right.
if you go and click on a page and then you spend a couple of minutes on that page, there's a really good chance that you're really engaged in that content. And that means that, you might be really interested in it. The holy grail really is a user account or a profile, and that goes sort of hand in hand with form submissions. When you set up a user account and a profile, you are basically saying, "Yeah, I'm buying into this website. I'm going to give you my personal data." And there's a couple of ways of doing that. You might give them a social media account as your user account, and with that social media account, the website might be able to pull additional data that's already on your social media platform. So, for instance, if you log in with a Facebook account, potentially you could ask for permission to see other things that are already stored on your Facebook account. And that's quite an easy way of learning about that customer. With a Google account, you probably get slightly less, but still you'll get an authenticated email address, which is really important for marketing purposes as well. When you have somebody has a user profile on your site, that gives you the opportunity to capture more detail about them. So you can have your account area, your profile area, and then you can start to get some of those psychographic data points that we talked about there. So you might ask them what their interests are. So are you interested in dogs or are you interested in cats? And that's going to build up your profile for them to understand, to show them that content in the future. You might also get some of the other ones around age and gender. You might ask them for their date of birth. You might ask them if they're male or female or non-binary or other options. All of these things, anything that you can do at the user account level to ask people to give you more data, allows you to personalize the site more heavily. And then the final thing is third party data. Now, this is a slightly contentious one, I guess, and
Mm,
will be more contentious over the excuse me, over the coming years. Is third party data is where you use data from other platforms and you match that user. So we talked a little bit about customer data platforms where you can aggregate feeds from data from different platforms, and you can build up what's known as a single customer view of that person. And you can use that in different ways to campaign and market to them. Um, so I'm just going to touch on first party and third party data now.
Okay.
So first party data is the data that you're giving to the website that you're on. So it's saying to the website that you're on, you can take my data and you can use it. Third party data is where you might be matching somebody against their Facebook profile, or you might be seeing what they've done in with their Google profile or Instagram or any of these kind of social accounts or different places where you can feed data in. Um, and I think we're getting to the stage where there are a number of legal challenges to what
Mm.
platforms such as Google Analytics are doing, particularly in the EU, around third party data. And I think there is a move towards a more privacy focused um, uh, approach to the data that we're collecting on users. Because I think when you start to use third party data, you're gathering way more information about them, right? And you are really building up a massive profile, but it becomes a bit scary. So I
Yeah.
think everybody talks about the way that you might be talking to your wife in the car about a particular subject. And then the next day you go to a website and it starts to show you what items that are related to the thing you were talking about in an advert. And you're like
Yeah.
this is too much.
It
I don't
feels
like
like
this.
you've been spied upon, doesn't it? It's not a pleasant thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there was a period probably a couple of years ago where I remember everybody buying Alexa devices and putting them in our homes. And then the outcome now is everybody's like, well, hold on a minute. Is it actually listening to me all the time?
Yeah.
And what's it doing with that data? So I think um, there's a real challenge for brands when they're sort of thinking about personalization, to be clear to users about how much data they're using and what data they're using to be able to personalize. Because I think most people would accept that if I go on the Amazon website and I start browsing products on the Amazon website, that it's going to show me other things that I might be interested in based on my behavior on that website. I think most people would accept that's a good use of personalization. Likewise, if I'm trying to find information about my dog and a health condition, I would value more content that indicates to me how I can get more answers to the subject that I'm looking for more quickly. That's a real benefit to me. But when you are browsing on one site and then another site shows you content based on what you did on a separate site, I think that's where it goes slightly too far.
Yeah. I suppose you've really just got to think really carefully about what is acceptable to your cohort of users. And there may be scenarios where it's entirely appropriate that third party information is brought in. I can't really imagine that in my head right now, but there's going to be a scenario where that's fine. Equally, there's going to be a scenario where it's going to feel invasive and strange if you're showing information from a third party. So I guess you must judge for the scenario that your business is in, what that boundary is. But also, just a quick question about this. Is this a changing landscape in terms of the law? Now, I don't really want to go down this rabbit hole too deeply, but
Mm.
is the law around this kind of constantly in flux? And is this something that we need to be mindful of as developers of websites? Do we need to constantly be inspecting how the law is moving? Is it sort of shifting sand under our feet?
I think it is, and I
Mm,
think the biggest change in recent history was the introduction of GDPR in the
right.
UK and the EU in, when was it? 2017.
I think
Now
so.
it was
Yeah.
a few years ago. Recently, and we're recording this at this time, the EU courts are launching investigations into platforms such as Google Analytics and Meta in terms of the information that they're gathering, um, and how that information is being stored and being used. Uh, and I think that the outcomes of those cases, they'll be, sometimes they'll appear in the press, and sometimes they'll be, it'll be 2 or 3 years before you hear anything. The outcomes of those cases will shift the direction of where we go in terms of privacy and how data is used. But a lot of that is focused on, I think, us in the UK, but also in the European markets as well. So recently, everybody's seen the explosion of AI and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Um, but Google's version, Bard, they haven't allowed that to be available in the EU right now because there are concerns about where the data to fuel that large language model has come from, and that hasn't been adequately explained. The so there is a shift in terms of people understanding more about data, understanding what they can and they can't do with it, making sure that they stick within the regulations, because ultimately a company doesn't want to be fined for the data that it's using. There's been an announcement in the press this week in Sweden where they have fined a couple of companies based on what they've been doing with their data,
Mm.
particularly in relation to Google Analytics. And I think that it's incumbent upon every company to look at the data they're capturing and making sure that they're doing it for the right reasons and they're capturing the data and their users know what they're capturing and why they're capturing and how that helps to enhance that experience. And more importantly, kind of gives them permission to do so.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So the jurisdiction that you are residing in matters, but I guess equally the jurisdiction of the user who is looking at your website, you might also need to be concerned about that. So there's definitely something here, and you need to be mindful of it. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's all right. It's a really important subject, I think. So, what do we do with the data that we've captured on a website? So, what we don't tend to personalize one to one very good. That requires quite a lot of computer output to be able to do that. But what we tend to do is we tend to group people into things that we call segments. So that might be a group of newsletter subscribers, for instance, or UK customers. So in the back end, when we're looking through with finding out more about a user, we're typically populating a contact record for them. So we are building up a profile of who they are, and then you'll probably want to add triggers to that to put them into different buckets, and then you can personalize based on the bucket that somebody's in, and that's a lot easier to manage than one to one. So some typical buckets there on the screen. So returning user, that's somebody that's been to your website before and then they've come back. And
Right.
we go, okay, well that's really interesting, isn't it? Because they're not just a one-time user, they've actually come back, and we know that they've come back. And actually, is there an action that we want to take for somebody that has returned to our website? So that's pretty typical basic segment. You can segment by geography, as we've got there. So a UK subscriber, a UK customer, or someone for the US, or somebody from France, or somebody from Germany. You might want to treat all of those differently.
Hmm. Hmm.
We've put down newsletter subscriber on the screen there. That's somebody that's actually engaged and wants to hear more about your brand. So if you know that they want to hear more about your brand, you might treat them slightly differently. You might, if they're a newsletter subscriber, you might give them an extra promotion when they come to your website. You might give them an extra 10% off a product. Product level segments are really interesting as well. So somebody that has maybe gone to your website and looked at men's jeans or have looked at shoes, you can put them into a segment, and then that they're interested in those kinds of things. And you can get these segments as deep as you want to do it, but you will have to manage that content. You should only personalize and put people into segments that you think you've got the time and the bandwidth to be able to cope with putting rules in
Right.
place for. So you might not necessarily have, segments that is, well, they like shoes that are in gold with size 5,
Yeah.
because actually what are you going to do with that segment? How are you going to personalize that segment? You might show them more gold shoes, I guess, but it just might be that they like shoes.
I feel that
Another
that segment in particular is so interesting. I am I'm a sucker for that. Basically, when I use the Amazon website a lot, and whatever whatever algorithm they've got going on there, it is finely tuned to me, and it shows me products which always seem to be highly relevant to me, even if I haven't searched for them recently. Somehow it understands me incredibly well, and I come back and buy things. There's no coercion there again, but it definitely results in a good ROI from the effort that they put in on my behalf.
Yeah, and they've had years to do it,
Right.
and they've spent a lot of money making sure that there's a reason why they're the biggest e-commerce platform in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they do that. There are some challenges though to putting personalization in place. So lack of tools is probably the biggest one. So not everybody has access to these tools. You want to do personalization, you can't do it. We talked about privacy concerns around the capture of data and then the storage of that data as well. Where are you going to store it? Actually, I think people almost forget the amount of data that could be captured and like the size of it and where's that going to go. And for even for small websites, you might be talking about hundreds and hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes of data that you might be capturing. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see and have seen over our time working with personalization is the time and the knowledge about what
Right.
you're doing, the experience maybe internally within your business about how to do this and why you might do it and the decisions that you take. I think that there never seems to be enough people in the team to spend on this kind of work unless you're a massive e-commerce business where it fundamentally underpins your entire strategy. But for most businesses, they don't necessarily have a team in place to be able to do that. And it can be quite time consuming when you're trying to work out, okay, I need to put a rule in place to capture these people, but then I need to measure it, and then I need to work out whether that measurement is accurate. And if it is accurate, what's it telling me, and what's the outcome, and what do I need to change potentially in the future? And then finally, I think everybody's a bit unsure about AI at the moment and
Mm,
how it works, what it means. It can obviously be a massive benefit and a massive driver for personalization, where you're able to kind of offload some of that decision making to a third party or to a different platform or to a model that will then come back and give you everything that you need with minimal effort. Um, but I think it's a state of flux at the moment, and I think it's challenging for people to think about that and the worries about getting it wrong
yeah.
lead into some of the GDPR and some of the privacy and data issues that we talked about previously. Is when you get it wrong, what's the impact?
Right.
Um, so that's a big challenge for everybody right now.
Can I just ask, you were mentioning there about obviously, if you spent a lot of time designing these flows, for want of a better word, you've built in this personalization. And then you mentioned on the flip side of that, then there's obviously inspecting whether that's worthwhile. So I guess it's a little bit like dropping analytics into the website. That's fine. But unless somebody's actually prepared to spend time looking at the analytics, it's probably pointless. Are there any scenarios in which there is a set it and forget it purpose to personalization where you don't necessarily need to look at the data that's coming back? You just put something in place and let it run, and it's fine that you don't need to, you don't need to get data and analytics off the back of it. Are there scenarios where you can do that and just let it run? You've set it up, it's good. You don't need to worry after that moment.
Potentially, and I think some of those scenarios would be like where somebody's coming from a particular third party channel
Right. Yeah.
or your referrer or a location where you want to give them something specific. So two types of personalization really. There's the ones where you want to show them some content based on who they are, that kind of one-to-one thing. And then there's the other one where you're trying to drive increased sales or revenue, um, or trying to increase something. And that's the one that really needs measurement.
Got it.
So, if you are recommending content to users, or you put in a rule that recommends content based on what you think they're doing, and your goal is to drive more people to complete a form, for instance, then you'll want to know if more people are completing that form based
Yeah.
on personalized rules that you put in place. If it's, well, I just want to show a 10% off message to anybody that comes on Facebook, you probably don't need to measure that too much
Right.
because you've got an offer code anyway. But
Got it.
measure
Okay.
it that way.
Yeah. Great.
So we started just talking with, around personalization, particularly with WordPress. So WordPress is a CMS that we use. We think it's the leading CMS on the marketplace, primarily because it's open source. So it allows you to do what you want with it. It comes with no license fees. It's got the most friendly user interface that you can find out there on a commercial CMS right now. And it is really easy to use. So we like WordPress a lot, and we're able to use it for the majority of our clients. But there is a challenge with it, and that's the personalization is not in WordPress core. So when we talk about core, we mean kind of baked into the product from the start, which means that it's available for everybody to use regardless of when you pick it up. And that's a bit of a challenge from a commercial or business perspective that wants to implement personalization, because it's already baked into other commercial CMSs on the market, such as Sitecore or Kentaco or Optimizely. So we believe that it should be in WordPress, and we've been developing a product to make sure that it is available in WordPress.
Nice.
And the reasons for doing that is we want to elevate that user experience for people that use WordPress. We want to help them boost conversion rates and increase loyalty and be competitive. And we think it's really important that businesses are able to do that in WordPress. So we've created a plugin called WP-DXP. It's a plugin that allows personalization just at a really simple level for small, medium, large businesses, whoever you are, whether you're a big publishing team or whether you're just a hairdresser down the road. It's a free plugin. It's a free download. And what it allows you to do with WordPress's block editor, it allows you to choose some rules to whether to show or hide content. It's not complicated. So on the right hand side of that image there, you can see the types of rules that we have in place. So we have rules based on time. So if somebody spent more than 10 seconds or 30 seconds looking at this page, maybe you want to show them a new piece of content or inject some content into that page, maybe as an offer, for instance, or maybe why don't you go and look at something else if you're interested in this subject. That's quite a good use of personalization.
Yeah.
You can do it based on their device type. So are they on mobile or are they on a desktop browser, for instance? On mobile, you might want to show them something different. Are they a new or returning visitor? What time of day is it? And then there's some more complex rules within there. So, which site have they come from? We talked about that quite a lot. Whether they filled in a form on your website. So if they filled in a form, you might want to show them a different message to people that you show that haven't filled in a form maybe as a thank you if they're subscribed to your newsletter. Maybe they've bought a product on your site using, WooCommerce, which is the kind of biggest e-commerce plugin on WordPress. And because they've bought one product, you want to show them some related content to other products. So the plugin's there, it's free, it's easy to use. Have a go at it and let us know what you think.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? So you mentioned that you've got these variety of conditions, if it's this time, if it's this geographical location, if you've come from this website, whatever all those conditions are, then the premise there is that if that condition is true, if it's triggered, you then show some content or you don't show the content. It's literally on-offable, if you like.
On-offable. That's as simple as it is right now.
Yeah.
We're working on some updates to it that allow it to be a bit more complicated. So to be able to put people into segments, to be able to lead score them,
nice.
To be able to use multiple rules, to be able to have an if-else condition on some of those rules as well. So all of that's coming, but at the moment it's a simple drop in, put it in your website, use it, give us some feedback.
Yeah. And another quick question, the conditions, are they stackable, or you meet the one condition, you trigger the on-offable?
They are stackable.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you can add the time of year plus you're coming from this country. That's fabulous.
It can get really complicated.
And one last question. Sorry, I keep asking these questions. The data about this, because given everything that we said earlier about third-party data and what have you, one of the things that a lot of people like about WordPress is that you are in control of that data. And I'm guessing that this is stored on your infrastructure. The data that you're gathering and the triggers that you're triggering are all being stored in your own database. So you're able to manage that and be confident that it's yours. You don't need to worry about the whole third party piece.
Absolutely. And
Nice.
that's an important point to us, is that it is first party data. It's what people have done interacting with your website. It's stored in your WordPress database. It is your data. I mean, it's your customers' data, but it's
Yeah.
stored for you. We're not using third party data. We're not trying to come up with some complex way of doing that. We're literally just going, right, based on what your customers are doing, what do you want to show them?
Great.
So lastly, I just wanted to touch on where personalization is going next. So we have touched on AI, and that's going to play a pretty major role in the future. That's clear. I think it's worth thinking about in terms of personalization. How does AI impact? I think the biggest thing is for it to automate a lot of the content rules that you are putting in manually. So I talked about, when you need personalization, sometimes people fail at personalization because they don't have a big enough team, or they don't have the experience to do that content, and they're not quite sure what to do. So where AI can help is that it can provide automatic rules for you out of the box, and add rules to content blocks based on what it thinks your customers are looking for. It can generate new content for you. So whether that's, you've got some customers looking at these kinds of subjects, maybe AI can help you to understand what other subjects they might be interested in based on what it sees in its language model, or based on what other people might be looking for. And then finally, personalization in chatbots is a key area where you don't necessarily need to have a person, a human agent, interacting with the people on your website. Actually, you can have an AI chatbot that can cope with a normal language interaction with someone, and then it can remember what they've done before, and it can store the information that it's having with one chat, so it can understand what other people might want in the future as well.
I think those number one and number two are really particularly excellent.
Mm.
Just the idea that the impediment to doing any of this may simply be that you don't have the expertise to create the conditions. You haven't really got that understanding. But the idea that the AI could be instructed, if you like, to come up with the conditions and build out those conditions for you, so that essentially all you have to do is inspect that. Yeah, that is what I wanted. That's probably what I was trying to build, and then click go. Yeah, that's really, really
And
interesting.
a lot of people are using AI for that right now, right? So if you look in the SEO community, for instance, you will find lots of people typing into ChatGPT, inspire me with like 20 posts about this subject, and
Right.
it will come back and it'll do that thinking for them. It doesn't get it right all the time. And it's not aware of everything right now. But as we look to the future, that ability to provide the inspiration and then maybe carry out the work as well is where AI can really shine, I think.
Yeah. And obviously, looking to the future, number three there, the idea that the website could, in some way, modify itself based upon what you've done and then create something that it didn't exist before
Yeah,
at that exact moment based upon all of the different things that you've been looking at. That's truly amazing.
it is. Whether we get there or not, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, it's like putting a crystal ball into the future, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think regulation will have a big impact on this, and
Hmm.
data models and things like that. I think the opportunities are there to start thinking about some of these ways forward. So that's us really. Um, as I said, you said right at the top of this, we are a digital agency. We look after open source tech is our priority. That's our space of where we like to be. Um, we are a senior team full of professional people. We like each other. That's the most important thing. Like any digital agency, you should be a family, right? And we are a family, and we will have families as well. But WordPress, Laravel, React, all of those things, they're our go-to. That's what we do.
That is a really fascinating subject. Honestly, it feels like if you're not doing this, you really are kind of missing a trick. And hopefully, people who've been able to access the different points of that presentation will come out with this thinking, yeah, I've got a place to begin that journey. I know the kind of things that I need to be thinking about. Does Filter, your agency, do you take on these kind of clients? Is this the kind of stuff you are hoping to build more of in the future? Obviously, you've built a
Yeah.
plugin to help you with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we've been doing it for many years. I think it's a natural point or part of the website journey. So when we're looking at new platforms for people, this is one of the questions that we ask is, do we need personalization on this platform or this project? And what level of personalization do we need? Um, and it's very much one of those big questions these days related. Like we have other big questions like what security do you need and how much scale do you need? And are you interested in sustainability? And what about accessibility? Is that key for you as well? Personalization is one of those big questions, those big subjects. And what we find is that people come to us when they don't necessarily know all the answers and they're not quite sure, particularly those questions around data. Like, am I doing the right thing with my data? Where should I be storing my data? How should I be looking after it? How can I use it? How can I increase sales or revenue using personalization? Um, or where they've tried it and they haven't been able to make it work, or they're a bit confused about it. So I tried it and it didn't quite get anywhere, or this isn't working for me. Can you help me out?
Fascinating subject. The future of the internet, hopefully, is bright. Really enjoyed that episode. We'll be back with another episode of Unfiltered at some point in the near future. I've been Nathan. He's been Paul. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye bye.